Hello and welcome back to the Fight Your Own Battles YouTube channel, and this latest video on background to my wargaming activities. And let me first begin by wishing you a very happy and enjoyable 2023. May all your tabletop games be fun and all your defeats undeserved. Now, the channel's been a little quiet for the last few months, and there is a very good reason for this. This photograph was taken in the loft of my house, where I had my war games set up when I was to do most of what I used to do. But in recent times I've moved house, and I now have a house, and I have a bedroom which has been allocated. So this is now where my wargame activities will take place. Now that's a good thing. I have less space, but it's nice and warm and cozy and dust free. I have to create a new wargames table, and what I now have is this. This is what's called an ottoman bed. The bed lifts up and I have storage underneath, and underneath this I have a table that is made in about 15 minutes from its various components. And the two main components are these hinged legs that stay up when they're folded up and stay down when they're folded down. And the other thing are called modesty blocks. I'm not quite sure where that description comes from, but they are two plastic blocks that fit together. You then screw the two blocks together and you end up with a solid joint between two bits of timber, and I've used 2 by 2 inch timber to create a base. The cross braces that go in are fitted simply with dowels and holes, and I end up with a table which is 6 foot by 4 foot, and with thin ply tops is more than enough to support my scenery boards. Now this is a smaller table than I had before, but I have to say my 6 foot by 4 foot is more than sufficient for what I had in mind for Heroes All and Fight Your Own Battles, so a real leap forward. Now my scenery boards have been around for some time and have appeared both on the YouTube channel and on the website, but here's a few pictures of the board set up on the new table, starting with just this generic one showing what 6 by 4 actually looks like within the room. I can set it up for beach landings, this one where the beach is on the shorter side, but I've got boards so that the beach can be on the longer side. And if I need to do a large river crossing game, I've got some large river boards. The gap here is designed for the Airfix bridge that appears elsewhere on both the website and on this channel. Or if it's just a smaller river, I can substitute the big river boards for small ones. So this is the sort of flexibility that the board system gives me, and 6 by 4 is more than enough. But you'll notice all these boards are fairly flat. So what has been on the drawing board for some time and is now beginning to come to fruition are a system of modular hills. Now very recently I ordered from a guy called Dean on eBay. Dean runs a wood shop, and 100 6-inch by 6-inch MDF squares. They're 3-inch MDF. Now I know MDF isn't everybody's material of choice. It can be nasty stuff, and you should always really wear a particle mask if you're cutting or filing it. But this was the basis of my modular hill system, and a little bit of time thinking about how I would set up the modules resulted in a number of squares marked up with squares and dots. Now if you think about it, you can either have all 4 sides of a square raised, or you can have 3 of them raised, in which case you've got an open side and therefore a hill, a slope as I call it, or you can have 2 of them raised and that gives you a corner. So a little bit of mathematics, and the idea that each side would either be full length 1 inch high using 1 inch wood strip, or on the 6 inches would be 3 inches at 1 inch high, and then the last 3 inches sloping down to 0 to give you that, in fact, that slope element. So having spent a very cerebral morning drawing all over my MDF squares, I took them out to the workshop, fired up the bandsaw and started cutting them into shapes like these corners, and it became very apparent very soon how they all started to fit together. Then, using my lengths of 1-inch strip, I started to cut some standard slopes. These are 6 inches long with 3 inches of flat and 3 inches of slope, as I described just now. And very soon I began to start gluing, making up my shapes as required. The gluing, I used Evo Stick Contact, and it wasn't long before I had a great pile of all sorts of different bits of shapes, from ordinary corners to ordinary slopes to some of the shapes. The one right in the middle here, you can see, starts 6 inches wide at one end, comes down to 3 inches wide at the other, and of course at the other end the slope is simply from 0 to 1 inch over a 3-inch run. And here's a day's work sitting on my table. These have been allowed to dry for 24 hours before I've started to muck around with them, but I've got all sorts of shapes here, from solids to slopes to angles to corners, and these are going to be the basis of the modular hill system. And it was fun to think about starting to put them together and see what shapes I could make. The idea, of course, is that they don't just make slopes on one level. So on my table here is a basic square hill, but on top of it is another layer, and this is the whole point of having flat tops to them, in that I can pile up the layers one on top of the other. There's no need for scenery, of course, because I use separate terrain scatter pieces. So on the slopes, the flat bits, and right on the top, I can put whatever trees, bushes and broken ground and scatter material pieces I want to use. This shot shows how the geometry works and how the various corners fit together. The offset corners, the reducers, there's solid 6-inch solids, there's half solids in here, and the ordinary slopes at the sides. And if you've got a big enough space, you can go to 3 high. This rather large ridge would certainly take some attacking, and of course the slopes themselves can either be put right on top of each other like this to make a steep slope, or spread out more for a more gentle slope. Now the shapes I've shown so far have all had one edge on the edge of a board, but of course that doesn't have to be the case. If you want to just put a casual high ground in the centre of a board, then you simply can. And there's no reason, of course, why the hill has to sit square on to the rest of the board. You can angle it slightly, give it a second elevation, and really create a feature over which to do battle. And it's perhaps worth pointing out at this stage that although these hills sit 1 inch high and tend to be 6 inches square, that is an arbitrary thing that happens to fit my table. If you're playing with 10mm, 15mm, 20mm, 25mm, 28mm figures, whatever it happens to be, this system can suit you. Now, I'm not precious about this. If you're going to study my drawings and get your own tools out and do your own cutting and shatting and making your own hills, then all well and good. And of course, what I also have to say is that these are far from finished. They've got to be filled with polystyrene. They've got to be shaped into proper hills rather than just boxes and trays. They've got to be painted, filled, and then of course they're going to have just a basic scatter top without any detail, because as I said just now, I can put my own terrain pieces on the top. But even at this stage, setting them up on a board and just imagining coming down the road, looking into this ridge where the road crosses a ford, into the valley, the hill on the right, the less dangerous road on the left, what's going to be lurking in the hills, am I going to bump into the enemy here, is this a place I want to stand and fight? Already the juices are flowing. Like I say, there's still a lot of work to do, but what I'll do is the next video that's coming your way is looking at the Heroes All rules for buildings, bridges and rivers. So what I'll do is take that as an opportunity to demonstrate the new table and the new hills as we talk about the Heroes All rules for those 3 aspects. So stick around for that, and I'll see you soon. Thank you very much for your interest in what I do. There's more information at www.fightyourownbattles.co.uk. Like, subscribe for more, hit that notifications bell, and when there's more to come, you'll be the first to know.